I want to remind all of you to subscribe to our channel. It's youtube.com/film talk radio. And today we're going to be talking about creative spaces and places and how to nourish your creative soul. So, Christina, you've got a book that's about to come out. You've got this artistic life in Santa Fe.
I had a consistent practice about a decade ago. And then, after about 5 years, I actually never did anything with my first project. I just kind of let it be there. I mean, I celebrated completing what I thought was my first book. And then I actually started working with flowers and built a small floral design business. And then it wasn't until my 40th birthday when I first left San Francisco to go to Southern California, to Ojai and to Santa Barbara, that I think that creative identity and that my soul's journey really started to come to the forefront again. And then actually the pandemic was quite helpful for me because, being forced to be inside and be alone. And I lived in Southern California for about 6 months, went back to San Francisco for about 6 months during the pandemic. And then at the beginning of January 2021, I actually came to Santa Fe with one of my best friends. And then I just ended up staying here. And that was where the creative journey really sort of solidified. So I think it was a convergence of the moment of my life, the nourishment of New Mexico and Santa Fe in particular, and my own soul's readiness to emerge on that path.
And the friend you mentioned, is that Danny?
Yes, that's my and actually so that's my really dear friend Danny, who he's definitely one of these people that I consider part of my soul family. I mean, we met in Vietnam 20 years ago when we were both recent college graduates. We didn't immediately connect or I think like each other. Actually, like I was living in Hanoi and had an internship, and then I really wanted to work for an advertising agency and a specific international advertising agency in Saigon, because there was a project related to nonprofits in Hanoi that I thought that this agency would win, and I wanted to work on that project. But I kind of delayed, and then actually the Danny ended up working for that agency, and then and we ended up living together, and then I worked for a different agency, and our families were connected even before we met. So Danny actually met my uncle in Vietnam, in Saigon before I even knew him. And Saigon is a, city of 9 million people. And I didn't even, because that uncle was sort of estranged from the family. And my other uncle in the States, my mom's brother, sent me a message and said, "Oh, you should meet with your uncle. He's also in Saigon. Here's his address. Here's his number." And then when I came home, Danny and I were sharing a house at the time. I was so excited that I had a family member in Vietnam, and I told Danny his name, which was it's not a Vietnamese name, and his son's name is Ali, also not a Vietnamese name. So I was telling Danny about my uncle, and he said, "Oh, I know him. I met him." And so he actually met my uncle. So the point of that is, Danny is definitely a soul friend, part of this soul tribe and family that I believe, it's a really beautiful part of life to meet those people that maybe you journeyed with in another life, but they're here with you as a deep friend. So yes, the journey started with Danny to New Mexico. I knew that I was going to stay. He wasn't necessary, he kind of just like brought me here. And then, he went on his own journey. He went to Mexico. Is back in the States now, but hoping to go back to Mexico at some point. And actually the forefront of my book, the front story, is actually about my journey with Danny. And then the kind of deeper stories about family history and my own, creative and spiritual journey.
And the book is a memoir.
Yes.
Can you tell us the title yet?
It's called The Veil Between Two Worlds, a memoir of silence, loss, and healing. And so it's, during this, I don't know, I would say it was a creative and spiritual awakening. It was really interesting because, what there I felt like I was living in kind of different periods of time, both healing parts of my, I mean, living in the present moment, but also healing parts of my past, and also having this sort of spiritual experience at the same time. And that's kind of what the veil can symbolize many different elements of life. For me, it was very much like a spiritual and physical journey, and a journey that, I also realized, my mom, who passed away when I was a teenager, was with me, because what happened during that period was, my physical experience, tangible experiences in this world were triggering very deep wounds that helped me heal them. Because I think, sometimes it's hard to re-experience things that were traumatic for us, but I think sometimes maybe it's necessary in order to like touch that wound, to access it, and then to be able to heal it. I met a lot of like, older female figures that I think were symbolic of, ways my mom, in a lot of ways, different characters, people that I really, I think I needed to meet to understand her, and to understand myself as a woman, and then also to understand, many of her wounds that she went through. So it was a really, when I look back, it was a really incredible journey of a few years. And that's what, the book kind of, the front story, again, like I said, is this road trip that Danny and I go on, that starts with an ayahuasca retreat in Santa Barbara, and then I end up in Santa Fe. But there's a second backstory, which is the turning point of when I turned 40, and then there's further family history and backstory.
And the death of your mother as a teenager, was that a formative experience in your life? Was that a defining moment for becoming who you are?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's interesting because, every year around, the anniversary of her death. So I was 14 when she died, and it was in 1994. It was formative on so many levels. And every year around the time of her death anniversary, which in the Vietnamese tradition, death anniversaries, and I think you mentioned before too, also Jewish tradition, these death anniversaries are celebrated. And I think that that's such a beautiful way to remember, remember our deceased ancestors, but also for, in Vietnamese tradition, we invite them to come back. It's kind of like the Day of the Dead, but it's just for, an individual family member. And Danny actually was the one who sort of initiated this tradition in my life at the 24th anniversary of her death. So I think for many years, I focused on, I lived the storyline of how loss impacted my life, her loss in particular. And I was so, I was so immersed in that story, which is a part of the story, but it's not the whole story, right? There's so many elements of my mother's story that aren't just about her loss when I was a teenager. There was the fragmentation of what happened to, my dad and my sister, which I feel is very sad, just because, she was kind of the thread that sort of was able to hold us together. And then when she passed, it was almost like we were, I thought we were, we were just like passing chips in the night. We weren't necessarily a unit, and we didn't really know how to love each other. And we probably didn't even really know how to love ourselves, and in retrospect, when I look back at that time, I started to develop a little resentment toward my father that I carried for a long time, and really looked at my mom like, like she was this and she was a wonderful human, but I really neglected my relationship with my father because I was so focused on the loss of this person.
When you came to Santa Fe, how did that happen? I know you traveled around a little bit and drove all over the country and ended up here working in the arts. And so let me commend you on being a young person working in the arts in Santa Fe. I know there's not enough of us, so I'm always happy to have a new one, and somebody who's doing such amazing work.
It was truly, magical. And I know, for you grew up here, so I think your perspective might be different, and maybe sometimes, people, I think maybe who grow up here can kind of not see the beauty that maybe other people see and feel, because it's so new to us, So the first time I came to Santa Fe was actually in the fall of 2019, and it was the fall that I turned 40, actually, and it had a really strong visceral impact on me. I mean, all these things were happening in San Francisco that made it very clear that my time in San Francisco was over. I mean, I think I never had any car problems, and then like in a matter of like 2 weeks, I got a ticket. First of all, I got towed. My sister was in the hospital, and like while I think I was in such a rush to get to the airport and organize my plans that I didn't realize where I parked, but I parked in front of a gate. And then so while I was in Indiana, my car was towed, and then it was there for like 10 days. So it was a huge fee to get my car out. And then I got a ticket. I got, my window was smashed, which again, like 5 years of having a car in San Francisco and never anything. And then I started to spend time outside of the city, and I went to this coffee shop in this plaza, and then somebody like backed into my car. So there were all these signs that were like, it's like, this is not working anymore. And it's time, it's time to transition. And during that time, I took a trip to visit my friend who was doing a workshop here in Santa Fe. She's based in New York, upstate New York. And I really, I mean, I think like many people, I think it was August. So I arrived late, and it was, hot and steamy. And that immediately brought me back to, the first moment that I arrived in Hanoi in Vietnam, and just the thickness of the humidity. And I felt like I was transported to another country and to another world in a way. And that whole trip with her was that, I think it was just a weekend. It was really special. Just to walk around and to be here and to meet some of her friends and to be with her here. And so then after that, it was sort of the beginning of this, I want to take a break from San Francisco. And I was set on coming to Santa Fe, and she was as well. And so we were thinking about getting a place together. But at the same time, she was going through a lot of her own, personal stuff. And I felt that if we were living together, it would be kind of mixed, and I would get lost in maybe her journey. But I mean, I thought I found a place on Craigslist. I put, and it was definitely too good to be true. And I just thought I was getting lucky, and then it was like meant to be. But it was I put a deposit down, and it was basically a scam. So I lost $1,000. And then I was really afraid then I thought, oh, well, the sign is I should not go to Santa Fe, because of this. And this was around all the time that the car stuff was happening. So that was my first time like trying to come to Santa Fe, and I basically decided not to. The second time was actually during the pandemic with the same friend, and she was living with friends, and they had an extra room, and I lost money a second time because I actually put money down to stay with them, and they decided not to let other people stay. And so I took the space. And then again, I backed out again. I decided not to. So it took 3 times for me to finally get here, a year later in 2021. And, I mean, I think there's a reason why so many creative people come to this area. I think it has something to do with the spaciousness of the land. And
No, go ahead.
And I think for me, what it was is that it allowed space for sort of my nervous system to calm down a bit, to go from being in California, where a lot of life was familiar and known, to an unknown. And I just spent a weekend at a Joe Dispenza retreat, and a lot of what I am thinking about lately.
Joe Dispenza, who is he?
He's I don't know what you'd call him. He's very much into epigenetics, and he teaches a lot of meditations and has this huge community following now. And it's he teaches a lot about, the mind body connection, and helping people to sort of overcome their environment through meditation without actually even, going to a different place. So anyway, so the link to that, and we can maybe talk about Joe Dispenza later because it's very fresh to me. But the link to Santa Fe in my past life was that I needed to be in a completely different environment to sort of reprogram myself. And that was part of the beginning journey of Southern California, but then like even more so here, and not knowing anyone, being in the middle of a pandemic, all these things, being forced to be alone. I ended up with this great casita behind the house that, Fremont Ellis, who was an artist who lived in the 20s in San Francisco, in Santa Fe. I got really lucky with all of these things, and life it just kind of unfolded, but it allowed me a lot of time and spaciousness to work on my book, to really reflect, to go through those wounds, and to channel everything through my writing. So, and to develop once again, because I used to have the consistent writing practice, but to really be in that again. So I just had a very simple routine of, waking up early, writing for a couple hours, going for a walk, and then transitioning to other things in my life. And I was in a memoir writing class at that time that helped me to be in a consistent pattern of like submitting a chapter and getting feedback. And then, I hired my teacher to help me because it's my first book that I want to put out, that I structurally I had some problems because there were so many experiences that I wanted to share, and I think I was moving the reader along to too many different worlds, and it was just I needed extra support to kind of pull that together. So yeah,
Yeah,
but as it relates to Santa Fe, I guess it cracked me open in a way, as I mentioned earlier, where when I was young, I thought it had to be through wounds and through pain, but it cracked my creative spirit in a way that there didn't have to be an association with pain. It was just like, it was and I'm happy that it's taken me this long to put out a book, because, at this age, it's not like this vengeful, like I'm so hurt, all these things happen to me, I'm a victim. It's more, these are the lessons that I've learned. And this that I hope in some ways in particular may be inspirational, or provide some sense of solace to women in particular, to claim their journeys, whatever that journey may look like, even if it looks very unconventional to what their peers or friends are doing.
Talking about your process a little bit, I know you've been waking up earlier and earlier. I know you're doing some of your best work at dawn. Can you maybe start at dawn and we'll go from there?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a morning person. Even, in my first, what I see iteration of my commitment to writing in my early 30s. And then I said, as I mentioned, I sort of transitioned to working and building a small floral design business. And that also required waking up very early, because I still had a full-time job. So I would, and the flower market, it opens at, I don't know, 2-3 o'clock in the morning in San Francisco. And it's actually a really kind of incredible experience, but I would, basically have to wake up, depending on the project that I was working on, at, 4, never earlier than 4, but, oftentimes 4, get to the flower market, buy flowers, put them in my car, drive to work, leave all the flowers in the car, leave the trunk open, and, and then go back and do more work. So I think both the combination of, my initial period of writing, and then also my work with flowers, everything, revolved around the morning. And so and also even my time in Vietnam. I mean, if you go to Vietnam, like before the sun rises, there are people out. I don't know if it's still like this in Hanoi, but the first time that I was in Hanoi, I mean, people would bring their dumbbells and like, like a bench press bar, and then they're out by the lake, and all these women are doing aerobics. And so I knew, even, in my early 20s, there was already something that was emerging about like this morning time, before most people are up. And there's so much that it's not about accomplishment to me, but it's more about like the connection to yourself. You're just emerging out of that, out of sleep. So and for me, I mean, this might happen to some people late at night, but for me, it happens early in the morning, where you're still very connected to something spiritual, to another dimension. So writing very much it is still very much my spiritual practice. So yeah, I mean, I try to wake up really early. I mean, not really early, 5, sometimes earlier. Now I'm sort of, really into these new meditations. So, and I'm working on, I am working on a book project, but there's another smaller project that I'm working on now that doesn't require so much of the creative energy, but still the energy. So, I just have this routine where go to bed early, wake up at 5. And I actually don't need that much time to write. And I don't want to spend my entire day writing. I think that there's something about the constraints. I think a lot of creativity actually happens in a constrained period. I mean, I think you can be more, if you have all day to work on something, you're kind of like, I don't want 8 hours to work on my book in a day. I mean, maybe some days if I'm in a specific period of editing and really want to be immersed, but for me, I usually, and I've tried to condition myself, kind of tap out at like 2 hours. And then I think that there's something beautiful about letting something linger. And I know Julia Cameron has mentioned this too about walking. So I think she really has it, that routine spot on. Because for me, what I found is that if I write for a few hours, and even if it's not pure writing, whether it's editing or just like reflecting on the book or reading something related, and then letting it go, but letting there still be a question of what's coming next, stopping before you feel complete, like not so that it's perfect, but it's like stopping, at a moment where I'm kind of like, what's coming next? What do I need to incorporate? What's missing? And then letting it go, and then walking and sort of loosely thinking about it. But then, allowing your subconscious mind. I mean, there's so much that we're always using our conscious mind, but I actually think that there's more power in using the conscious mind to train the subconscious mind, and then allowing the subconscious to work through a lot of these things, for you. That's why, there's an evening yoga nidra class, which is like deep yoga sleep, that I love. That's based, it's the teachers in San Francisco. So it's at 8 o'clock San Francisco on Pacific time, but it's 9 o'clock here on Wednesdays and Fridays. And, as much as I can do that, I do that, because doing like a yoga nidra class with a teacher that you really, resonate with, and then just going to sleep, to me, I mean, I think it's sometimes more productive than the conscious waking hours. And that, links to sort of what we were talking about, or what we started to talk about with meditation and with this amazing retreat that I went on. I'm still like, so just grateful for. And I really think it's going to be in my opinion, at least, a very strong thread in the future of how we help, each other and humanity heal. Because a lot of times we're in a part of our brain, and we're living in stories that are not serving us. And as someone who writes memoir, I mean, I know it's memory, and stories are beautiful to me, but they're also dangerous in a lot of ways. So we have to be careful about the stories that we're repeating to ourselves.
Christina Vo, let's use this as a chance to talk about meditation. It's an interest we both enjoy. Earlier this week, a couple of friends were both surprised that I was into meditation, and I said, well, it's essential. So we've meditated together a couple of times, but you really see it as a practice, and it's for those who aren't schooled in it. You focus on breathing, you clear your mind of all thoughts. What can you tell us for us amateur meditators?
I don't know if what can I say? I mean, I think it's interesting, because during this Joe Dispenza retreat, he tries to get people into this, first through he has a number, a few different meditations, but one is sort of like that starts with like a breath work, the pineal gland meditation, which, you move energy from, through basically the chakras. He calls them energy centers.
What is a pineal gland?
It's the part of the brain that he explained it. I cannot give a detailed explanation.
I've heard it explained as your third eye.
I don't know if the pineal gland is the third eye, or because we were meditating sort of like connecting to maybe it is. I don't know. I can't explain the scientific part of it, but I do get that, it's moving energy through the body so that you can kind of retrain your mind body connection, right? Because basically what it, like, and what I mentioned about stories is that, you can't change your life if you're reliving the same thing every day, right? If you wake up, and he said 86% of people wake up, and they do the same thing. You do the same thing. I mean, I do this. And when he was talking, I'm like, wow, most people, 86% of people will grab their phones. So it's because then you need the reinforcement of, okay, this is my identity. This is who I am. Grab my phone, check my Facebook, check my Instagram, check Twitter, check all the things that reinforce a specific identity, right? Like, oh, I got this many likes. I didn't get likes on this. Like, this is important. This isn't important. This is happening in the news. This is my worldview. And I want to reinforce that. So if you do the same thing every day, your life is not really going to change. And this is also about our past experiences, right? If we had a very, traumatic experience, let's say with relationships, and have this story that relationships always go in a certain direction, we will live through that story again and again and again until we break that pattern. So, with Joe Dispenza's meditations, it's very much about, kind of getting beyond connecting with the energetic field and creating through the energetic field. But to do that, you have to, release what your body has been conditioned to do, and then recreate, create new experiences. And so most people, and I see this, you can learn a lot about people in basically, like, the first 10 minutes of whatever they want to share with you. I've learned it's very simple to learn one's programming, right? So especially then, if you spend enough time with people, many people are sharing the same story again and again and again, right? Like, oh, they're mad at this person. And if it's not that person, it's this other person. And it's just sort of a record, on repeat. And this also links to why Santa Fe was so magical for me, like not knowing anyone, right? Not being in a completely different space, not having the same routine. And I don't know if you feel that way, on your current, being in France now, and just I think that's why travel is so essential for people to just take themselves out of an environment and reprogram the brain, basically create different neural pathways to the story and the experience. And so, it was really funny because, like, when part of the retreat, when he was talking about this going through the whole, like, scientific process and explaining where he was trying to get to, he's like, you just have to, be in this place of no body, no mind, no time, like you're just basically in space. And I laughed to myself because when I was 8, somewhere around there, I was actually already doing this, and I would challenge myself at night, but I didn't know why I was trying to do it. I didn't understand, like, what I was trying to do, but I would tell myself, like, imagine no space. Like, what if there was no space, just this empty, and so I would get stuck in this as a kid for a while, but I had no idea. And then when he said that, I'm like, I was even trying to do that when I was a kid. And so basically when we're in that space, when we're connected to that space, because everything is energy, if you think about it, we can, even, I mean, there's so much scientific evidence around this. We can actually change matter. So through our thoughts, we can, and being in this energetic field, if we're aligned, if the emotions of that future experience of whatever we want to have is greater than our current experience, we can actually create that, in align with that in this field of energy, and then it will manifest in our lives. It will be brought to us. The challenge is, getting yourself in that space. And I think as it relates to, like, what we should do for meditation, it's just the consistency of the practice. And since I've been back, I don't know if I can maintain this, but I've been, doing 2 morning meditation and an evening meditation, and I feel great. Whether my routine will allow me to continue to do this, I don't know, but I wish this for everyone. on the drive back from Denver, I was like calling all my girlfriends, sending voice notes, and just, some of them follow Joe Dispenza as well. And I was just like, please, like, I want everyone that I'm close to understand the power we have, through our minds and through our energy and what we can create.
Christina, can you tell us a little bit about your routine and how that fits with meditation, how the two may go hand in hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned before, writing is definitely my sort of spiritual practice, and I think meditation is also a spiritual practice. I am in the middle of trying to incorporate, both of them more. I work in this isn't so much about routine, but how I do like to play with my mind, in the sense of I like to condition, to tell my mind what to do, basically. So like I said, the 2 hour sort of increments of, I'm going to devote 5 to 7 or 5:30 to 7:30, whenever I wake up, that time to sort of writing, and then I transition the mind. But I also do that as it relates to like longer chunks of writing and what I want to get done. I'm not somebody that I want things to get done, so I don't want to labor over. I'm not like a very particular writer. I'm more about the sort of the emotion about how the whole thing feels, right? That it's not just, I know some writers are very, very, very precise. I'm not that. And I'm also I love first drafts, because it's like the moment where you can just dump everything, right? Because then we can just revise. So the first draft phase to me is like falling in love. And I'm in that in my current project right now. And it's just beautiful to me, because it's just like because it's a spiritual connection to me. And very often, like with the writing, like I feel like what comes through is not me. Even with the book, like, it's not coming out until next spring. And actually it's they couldn't do it. My pub date couldn't be exactly on the death anniversary of my mother, but it's the day before the death anniversary, and that's very special to me. But that book doesn't even feel like it belongs to me anymore. I ushered it through the world. I put it together. It has a title, it has a cover. It's now its own entity. I mean, I'm very yeah, I mean, it's in the process of getting copy edited right now. And like, when I get it back, it doesn't feel unfamiliar, but it just feels like I did my part. I birthed it, and now it will have its own life, and whatever happens to it will happen to it. But I get a lot of questions about, writing routine, because a lot of my friends know that I'm pretty structured about it. And I think the same is true just for meditation. It's just, you just have to make time for things that are important to you, and things that are life affirming, and move, your energy forward, and move your life forward, really, rather than those things that might drain you or bring you back down, or repetitive stories that don't serve much, except to reaffirm a past identity that you might not want to, associate with anymore. So to me, writing, spirituality, meditation, it feels like it's all in its same sort of world to me. And those are my priorities. And I'm grateful that I don't have a family. I think I'm happy that my life has sort of taken that path, because I'm so invested in my creative life, and creating a world that I love, and hopefully more travel in the future, and just, and more experiences, helping other people. I think that is something that I see in my future, is really helping other people tap into their creativity. And as I mentioned before, with this first book, it's very much I have a very strong desire to help women, and to, inspire them to be on their paths, without this way of negating, I think the waves of feminism is another topic, but without, negating a masculine, or a man's experience. I'm not about that. I'm more just about women claiming their truth, and their, I keep using this word of spiritual authority, because there's so many for people, for men and women, whatever. It's just, there's so much on the outside, but I believe everything that you need is actually on the inside. And once you claim that, life sort of unfolds in this really magical way.
Yeah, I think looking within is so important to changing everything around you. And I've seen you really take meditation in a way where, you've got a meditation teacher. I know that can be helpful to many people. What is the difference between just like what I do is, either set a timer or not and focus on my breathing and clear my mind of thoughts, or of all thoughts, which sounds fairly simple, but once you begin to clear your mind of thoughts, then they start to pop up out of nowhere. So do you think it's beneficial to have a meditation teacher and not just do it on your own, or is there a difference so long as you're meditating? I know.
Well, I don't think it's so much about having a teacher. I really I like guided meditations. There's a group in Santa Fe that I like that sometimes join on Zoom. I think if you have some challenges like getting into a routine, sometimes like having a external source to sort of that you're committed to, right? That you're going to this group, or a friend, even, the friends that I met at the Joe Dispenza retreat, just texting each other and trying to get to like 30 days of consistent meditation. So I think it's not so much a teacher. I do really like guided meditations, and kind of like with the whole Joe Dispenza thing, there's a whole science behind it. Actually, and even, going through the whole weekend where you're getting the science, you're getting the lessons, and then you're doing the meditations, you can kind of understand like what you can actually do in meditation. So I think there's so many different types of meditations. I think clearing your mind and just being in that state where you're not in a fight or flight mode, because that's when you can get into the creative force of your life, right? And then going beyond that of just clearing your mind, then you can start to create in that energetic field. So you can start to set an intention of things that you desire, and start, I don't know if you want to call it imagining or manifesting, but that's sort of another level of where I think you can get. I think you can, enter this field and literally create with your thoughts. But clearing the mind, I think, is the first step for that.
One of my favorite meditation gurus, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, said, "Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor." Does that mean anything to you? I know his work is very meaningful to you.
Yeah, I mean, actually, like, even I didn't even think about this until you mentioned it. Or, I mean, I've thought about it, but it came up in my mind again. My creative life, again, at another moment in my time, is very, very strongly linked to my spiritual life. The second time that I moved to Vietnam, I was a communications officer for UNICEF, and it was a really challenging job. And my creative soul was starting to emerge then, but I didn't know which direction it would take. So after work, actually, I met this really talented Vietnamese designer who became a great friend of mine. And she introduced me to a spiritual community that followed in the tradition of Thích Nhất Hạnh. And so I would go there. I would actually go, to her design studio, and talked to her for a little bit, which her design studio was like a art gallery. It was so beautiful. She's so talented. There at that time, there was no formal, interior design training in Vietnam. And she was designing furniture. I mean, she's so innovative, so creative. And then we would go to this, to the Sangha, to the community, and follow Thich Nhat Hanh. And actually during that time when I was there, because he was exiled from Vietnam for decades. So when I was there at that time, it was the first time he was invited back to Vietnam. So I got to see him speak. I got to go to, there was a retreat sort of north of Hanoi, and I went with their community to that. And it was just, I think I had, a flip phone at that time, but I was just like, I wish that I mean, it's still ingrained in my mind, but I wish I had an image of everyone doing this walking meditation together there, because it was one of the most beautiful experiences. So Thich Nhat Hanh is very, very dear to me. And actually, interestingly, I mentioned that before my creativity came through a lot of pain. And there was one moment when I was really heartbroken. I was actually working and living in Geneva, and it was probably the lowest period of my life. And I knew I had to do something different. So I decided to go to Plum Village, Thích Nhất Hạnh monastery in the south of France. And but then I left Geneva. I ended up, I don't know if I flew to Paris, but then I missed a connecting flight or train. And so then I was like, oh, well, I'll just see if I can go see my family, my aunt and my uncle in Paris. And they didn't answer the door. So so I was just kind of spiraling, because it's like all these things were happening and I was like upset and I just wanted to get there. And then when I got there, it was so interesting because, there was went to the train station and a little bus, a shuttle picked us up. And then behind me, there was this Vietnamese German family. And there was a little boy who was so cute. And I don't know, I was just very drawn to this little boy. And then the mom calls him by his name, and actually his name was the same name as the guy that the kind of what I thought was the cause of all this heartache. And he had the same name as the little boy. And there was a moment for me where I was like, oh, I get what that message is. It's like, you can leave Geneva, you can go to a meditation retreat and think you can escape this pain, and you think you're putting the cause of that pain on that person, which it totally was not about him. It was much more about layers of my past. But you literally, you can't run from it. You have to face it, you have to address it, you have to understand it, but it's going to follow you. And to me, that's what that little boy with the same name of the guy symbolized. And I remember also being at that retreat, and there were these beautiful, like young people who committed their life to Thich Nhat Hanh. And one, people who, I remember one told me, she dropped out of a school in the UK and committed herself. And then there was one sweet Vietnamese novice monk who was just like, one day she was like screaming outside. I'm like, what is she screaming about? And I go out and she's like, just looking at the moon and in awe of the moon. And I was like, wow, these people are, they're just so in awe of life. And then at the same time, there was a group of, people around my age at that time, and we kind of connected. And there was an American woman who was currently at that time living in China. And she was so happy. And I was so envious because I was not happy at that time. And it was just, but I knew, she was a reflection of what I wanted to be. And I was grateful to have that, but I was also very jealous that she just seemed to have this happiness and peace that was inescapable for, it just so elusive for me at that time. And then I was there over, Christmas, and on Christmas Eve, I got really sick. And I actually, they had this whole event sort of in the community hall area. And I couldn't participate because I just was like in the bed, like cold and wanting to leave. But yeah, Thich Nhat Hanh has, in about 15 years ago, was a very important part of my life. And I'm, saddened by his loss, but also know that his teachings, continue to be with us.
Thanks so much, everybody. This was author Christina Vo. Her forthcoming memoir is The Veil Between Two Worlds. And I want to remind you to like and subscribe. It's youtube.com/filmtalkradio. New episodes each week on KTRC. It's Saturday at 1 p.m. And you can support the show at SantaFeFilmInstitute.org. It's a project of the Santa Fe Film Institute. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.